shins, right? Okay.
Yeah, and really whatever's happening.
Hello everybody, I'm Alex.
I'm Connor.
We're gonna show you the 2 Torpedo deadlift today. Connor's gonna start by showing you a few reps to the front and a few reps to the side. I just want you to watch his movement pattern as he does this. Beautiful job, Connor. He's gonna show us them from the side now. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna move into the points of performance of a deadlift. So Connor, I'll be turned back to the front. We're gonna start off feet, working our way up. So a 2 Torpedo deadlift is going to be a hip width distance stance. So notice it's not super wide. And we're gonna work, we don't want that. We want it right beneath the hips. Sometimes you might see coaches that do this for hip width distance. That's totally okay too, because sometimes our athletes have a hard time understanding what hip width and shoulder width actually means. From here, we're gonna work our way up. He's gonna stand all the way up, arms are long and loose. I'm gonna have him come to the bottom of his deadlift for me. Actually, I want you to turn to the side. Sorry, Connor.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, scoot this way a little bit.
Don't worry about it.
So, for this points performance, you'll notice it's shoulder over hip, hip over knee. He's got a nice triangle here. That's really important in the deadlift because we want to make sure that he's got a good angle from the hamstrings, and the hamstrings and glutes are loaded. When you look down at his feet, he's not in his toes, his weight is in the heels, so he's keeping that tension in the hamstrings. Neck is neutral. A lot of times you'll see athletes lifting their head up. That's gonna put strain here. Just tell them they can keep their gaze down, keeping that neck neutral. From here, he's gonna come all the way up to the top of that deadlift. And then what I want you to think about is I'll have you put those weights down.
Sure.
We're gonna talk about rotation and translation of the deadlift. So this is really important for you to note because common faults are gonna be where we see athletes actually do straight leg deadlifts. So from here, I'm gonna put this, you'll notice it's up on his shoulder and his hip. And the first thing he's gonna do is he's going to rotate or hinge at the hip in his deadlift. Perfect. So notice he's now just hinged forward. There's a slight bend in the knee. Now what he's gonna do is he's going to translate, and he's gonna do that by bending at the knee, but this angle of the shoulder to hip is going to maintain the same. Beautiful. So from here, what he's going to do is he's going to keep this angle the same. He's going to drive in the heels, coming up, bringing those knees just above knee height. Once he gets knee height, he then rotates back open through the hips, squeezing the glutes at the top. All right, so the deadlift is a really powerful movement. The reason we want people to have that hip width stance is it's our power-driven stance. It's going to load up through their hamstrings, their glutes. It's going to engage the traps up at the top. So I'll have you come back down one more time. So you'll see Connor has his traps. You can't see this actually, but I can see his traps are engaged. That's really important because otherwise what tends to happen as a common fault is they start to let the weight carry them down, and you'll notice that the athlete is rounding in their back. So if you see this, what you can do is you can come up to them, tell them to lift the chest and engage the traps. Something to note is you might cue lift the chest and your athlete will do this. So you have to be very intentional and mindful about that cue when you're cueing them through this. Stand on up, Connor. Let's shake it out. Okay, so talked about points performance. I kind of baked in a few common faults there. Now I want us to go into the true common faults that we were talking about. So come down to the bottom, Connor, and I want you to show them what happens when you lift your hips first. So you'll notice when he lifts his hips first, he looks almost like he's doing a straight leg deadlift, but now he's putting a lot of tension into the low back here. And his shoulders have now come below the hips. What's gonna happen is when he goes to lift that weight up, he's putting a lot of pressure into the low back, and we wanna avoid that. So one thing to note is if you see your athlete lifting their hips early, have them come back down to their bottom position, come back to this idea of translation and rotation, and tell them to drive through your heels, keeping the angle of the shoulder and the hip the same. So press through the heels, stop them at the knee, stop. And then you'll see here, all they have to do now is lift their chest, opening the hips, squeezing the glutes. This is a really common fault that you're gonna see in athletes though. So if you notice it, have them put their weight down and shake it out. I find that when I'm telling them too many things at once, or they're not really hearing what I'm saying, show them what you see in their body first so they can see exactly what's happening, and then give them the cues from there. The second thing that we see a lot of is when you come to the bottom is, so like we've been talking about, we wanna keep shoulder and hip angle the same till the weights come to the knee. But what tends to happen is athletes will lift their chest early, So what's happened? Now that angle's completely ruined, and they're gonna press through their heels, they're gonna stand up. They put a lot of pressure into their knees and into their low back when they do that. It looks a lot more like a squat. So when you see your athletes do that, have them come back to the ground, ditch the weights. And honestly, when I'm in class, I will do this. I'll put my hand on their back, and I'll say, drive through your heels, keeping this angle the same till the weight gets to the knee. Great, once the weight gets to the knee, now lift your chest, open your hips, squeeze your glutes. Giving them that feedback on their back helps them to feel, oh, I'm lifting early, so it helps them to realize, okay, I gotta keep my chest where it is until my weights have come all the way up to the knee. Then I finish by opening up the hips. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, so I love everything that Alex is talking about, and I think you can do it in like a really stepwise way, where you place your arm on the athlete's back, and you ask them to really slowly start to come out of your deadlift. And then if they're someone who lifts their chest early, they're gonna start to do that a little bit, and you're gonna say, stop, drop your chest, okay, let's keep going. And then they're gonna start to do better, and then they're gonna start to stop, drop your chest, and just helping them understand kind of where the things fall apart in there in an effort to get them to properly translate, properly rotate, or to use less science teacher talk, shoulders and hips rise at the same time until your hands meet your knees, and then exactly like Alex is saying, stand up, finish out the rep.
Yeah, let's show them one more time the translation and rotation just with the in relation to shoulders to hips. So when you are at the bottom of your deadlift, you are going to translate that weight up by starting to straighten your legs, keeping the shoulders and hips at the same angle. Then you're going to rotate at the hip by lifting your chest and squeezing the glutes, opening the hips all the way. So when we say rotate, that means Connor's rotating at the hip and he's hinging forward, right? So everything that we do in a deadlift is in reverse when we come out of the bottom. So now he's rotated forward, he's gonna translate that weight down, he's at the bottom position. Now we're gonna do it in reverse. He's going to translate by lifting the hips, then he's going to rotate by lifting his shoulders, squeezing the glutes at the top, opening the hips. It's really important that we understand this because oftentimes, more than not, Connor and I were talking before this video, we'll see athletes that will do straight leg deadlifts. Very, very often, whenever we do deadlifts in class, they're doing straight legs. So big difference here is they're just keeping their legs completely straight. They're not loading through the quads as much. They're not engaging the glutes, and they're gonna put a lot more pressure into the low back if they're doing it wrong. So it's really important that we're noticing when our athlete is doing a straight leg deadlift versus a Romanian deadlift, which is what we do for 2 Torpedo days. Which a lot of people know.
Yeah, and there you go. Maybe one more thing that I want to throw out there while it's kind of coming to my mind as I'm going through these reps. Sometimes you hear athletes talk about my low back hurts a lot in their deadlift, and you watch all their reps from the bottom up, and their setup position looks good, and their translation's right, and their rotation looks good, and you can't really figure out what's going wrong until you look at the very, very top position. And it seems like for whatever reason, with the deadlift more than any other movement, the inclination is to finish kind of arbitrarily forward. And I can understand where it comes from. People are thinking about like, well, I gotta get my hips open, I gotta stand all the way up. But in the process, we end up hyperextending in that top position and putting a whole lot of pressure down into your lower back. So in the event that you see that, right, you see someone whose shoulders finish behind their hips or their hips finish out over in front of their heels, that's a good opportunity for you as a coach. I mean, you don't have to overthink this. Just tell them, hey, just stand up. Just stand up like you normally would, like we were having a conversation. And they'll probably fix it anyway. And then you call it to their attention, like, great, now squeeze your glutes together and keep your abs on. And just make sure that they're not overdoing it at the top.
Yep. One fault that we did not mention yet is the rounding of the back. So when you see an athlete at the bottom, what tends to happen sometimes is you see them round their back and they're really pulling in the low back versus actually using their legs. So if you see that, it's important. For me, a cue that I find works is, hey Connor, think about when we're in cow pose. Lift your chest, engage those low back muscles, and then come out of your deadlift. Use your legs to pull to the top, open the hips, squeeze the glutes, right? A deadlift is a leg-driven movement. Our arms are just, think of them as levers holding the weight. They're not doing any of the work, and that's a really important tip to drive home with your athletes. A lot of times you might even see an athlete that wants to pull with their arms. especially as we start to get into barbell, you're gonna see that. But when you see that with torpedoes, let them know it's a leg-driven movement. A cue that really works well for this is almost thinking about like they're twisting the ground open with their feet, driving the knees out and pressing through the heels. They're gonna feel so much engagement through their hamstrings and their glutes when they do that.
That they are.
That they are.
That they are.
Shims.
Shims.
Let's talk shims.
Yeah.
All right, so these are just options that you can do. Feel free to bake in any shims in your class that prep your athletes for the workout. So first shim that I like to do is good mornings. Bring your feet hip width distance apart, hands behind the head, take a slight bend at the knee. You're gonna hinge forward till the chest is parallel, holding there. Focusing on talking to your athletes about engagement in the low back, right? Loading through the hamstrings, they should feel that tension in the back of their legs, weight in the heels, and then drive through the heels, standing all the way up, right? I use the good mornings, and I'm sure Connor and a lot of you do too, as a way to bake in that mechanics piece, right? Our mechanics portion of the shims is our opportunity to control and command the space and really make sure we're looking for faults. And if we see any, yell them out, make one person's fault everybody's fault in that room. That is where you get to see and correct. And I've been talking to a lot of coaches about it. Use the mechanics shims because you can see what's happening, you own the room, you get to tell them when to move, when to go, when to stop. Take advantage of that. And then from there, what I personally like to do is an unweighted 2-torp deadlift. So meet me at the bottom of your deadlift without any weight. And what I personally find is it's really helpful for me to see the setup position, right? Shoulders over hips, hips over knee, back is flat, weight is in the heels, and stand, they come up. I watch for the movement pattern that's happening before any weight is added, because what happens when we add weight? Faults start to come out. So this is a great way for them to feel it in their body before we've added the weight. Next up, we add the weight in. At the bottom, I have them meet me here again. Same thing, I'm looking, is anything changed in the room for my athletes? And stand. Beautiful. Those are some great shims for you to bake in to your class. Take advantage of them. Use them as an opportunity to see your athletes move, to make sure you are setting them up for success before they get into the high intensity portion of class. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.